Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back here at the place. Yeah, it's been a month or so ago, and yeah, I'm sure I will tell you a little bit what I have been doing in a month. I hope you missed me. If you're here with me on Facebook or on YouTube Live, then just send me a message and I'll see that. And yeah, it's a month ago since we were here at the place. So let me do the official thing first, and then I'll tell you what we are, where I've been hanging out all this time. So welcome to the place and episode 211 already of Tell the Everyday Life Lesson podcast. If you can remember that. Today we are going to talk about freedom of choice and whether that really exists, or are people's choices shaped by the powers outside their own control. You know? It's an interesting discussion for more than one reason. It touched me actually also a little bit personal lately, so we'll go into that as well. Freedom of choice, for me, that falls mainly under the life energies, mental and manifestation energy. And just as a reminder, there are five life energies, and if you think about it, right? So there is physical energy. Let me just quickly go through this. There is mental energy, there is creative energy, there is manifestation energy, and last but not least, there is divine energy. And the topic of today, freedom of choice, does it really exist, actually falls under, for me, under mental energy and manifestation energy, you know. Um, so yeah, I already see someone coming online here, just saying hello. Well, hello. Um, I will respond to you later. Let me see if I can do that as well. Yeah, I think I can. I can even show you a little bit here in the scene, right? Hello, Irene. Good to have you here as well on Facebook Live or YouTube Live. If there's anyone else, just let me know. That would be cool. So that I know that I'm not completely by myself talking today, right? Yeah, as I said, without further ado, it's a month ago. Yeah, um, I've been a month out of the country. Literally, we went to the Netherlands. Me and Irene, who's online now, and we went to the Netherlands, see family, did a lot of dancing. We did some teaching, some other stuff, and then we went for a month. No, not a month. And we went for a week to the UK, where we saw some awesome dancing and met some friends and all that kind of stuff. So took a little bit of break of all kind of things, teaching dance in the studio, coaching people, and also from the place. But it is June and the summer is about to begin. Officially, it starts on June 21st, but I live in Dallas, and if you go outside and it is about 95 degrees, then for sure summer has begun already for us here in Dallas. So if that's true for you too, wherever you live in the world, just let us know. Today, does freedom of choice really exist? Now, well, apparently there is no freedom of choice what temperature it is outside unless you move to another country. And 95 degrees is really hot. Yeah. Um, so, are our choices shaped by the power outside, self, our own control, right? Free will is the idea that humans have the ability to make their own choices and determine their own fate. That's a little bit what it is about, right? We all want it. Um, oh yeah, before I forget, if you like to meet me on Zoom as well, I also have a Zoom live going on, um, and I see someone is coming in Zoom as well. You hear me as well, but I mute you first. So that we can talk after this show a little bit in the after party. So welcome if you just joined the Zoom as well. If you still want to join the Zoom in conversation, then just send me a quick message or send Irene a quick message, and we'll just send you the link as well. Yeah. So, but where was I left? Yeah, the idea of that humans have the ability to make their own choices and determine their own fates. Um, is that a real thing, or is life by itself or other things are controlling those choices, and do they have power over us? um, Actually, you can look at this from a philosophical point of view, you can look at this from a psychological point of view, and you can look at it from a scientific point of view. None of us actually is completely agreeing on this topic, so it's a huge topic. I try to cramp it in, let's say, 40 minutes, and hopefully give you and myself a little bit more clarity on the topic. Um, Now let's look. I'm not going to go all through all these things, but I want to give you a little bit my personal perspective. Whether you believe in God or not, for me that is not so important. But let's say there is a God. At least I believe that there is one thing that I can agree on, that it is the greatest gift He gave us. That is the freedom of choice. You have the freedom to believe in God or not. No one should hate you for it or love you more for it, for that matter, right? So that's a freedom of choice, but freedom of choice comes of course also with a lot of consequences. One of, I'm not sure if it's my own quote, but I like to think that it is, right? You have a freedom to choose, but you don't have the freedom of the consequences of that choice. Very often, you have, let's say I have here my nice mug of coffee. I have the freedom to throw it on the floor, but the consequence of that it will break or not is not entirely up to me. Yeah. So and we go a little bit into a little bit more serious topics like that. You know, like I said, the world and definitely scientists are by no means on the same page about this topic. If you just look at it from a pure scientifically point of view, that's kind of interesting, because if we have full freedom of choice, there will be chaos. But science actually always goes with cause and effect. So if I make a choice, then it's maybe based on something else that happens before me otherwise, and is that then a free choice? You have to think a little bit about it, but scientific world is always talking about cause and effect, which is a nice thing. So my choices always have an effect, and they don't only have an effect on myself, but they also have an effect of other things, which comes to the second point. So with the third point actually. So we had choice, we have consequences, and we have responsibility. And only those three words I would like to focus on. There are more topics that you can look at if it comes to making choices and the freedom of choice. But if you just stick to those three things, then it's already interesting enough and probably filling enough for an hour here on the place to talk about. Well, so, like I said, we all perhaps freedom of choice, but we certainly don't have a freedom of consequences, and the two are, after all, very inseparable, right? One does not exist without the other, right? So you can actually, I broke it down. I like to do things in a simple way, right? We make choices without realizing the consequences. Yeah, often that is often the case. Think about our food habits. We often eat things, and then we only realize later what the effect was on our health. Good or bad. And most of the choices, actually, that is actually well researched, are actually unfortunately made like that. We make a lot of choices without even realizing that the consequences. Sometimes we make choices without even knowing that we make a choice. So that's a whole different topic. We make choices because we are afraid. That's the second one. We are choice because we are afraid of the consequences. That happens a lot, right? I mean, if you just think about it, if you need to make a big decision, right, then we are afraid that we make the wrong choice, right? And so we are a little bit afraid of the consequence of the choice. Could be a financial impact, it could be a personal relationship impact, it could be a health impact, right? Do I make the right choice there? So sometimes that get us stuck of not making a choice at all. Does that make sense? And then last but not least, we make choices because we are aiming for a certain consequence or outcome. Yeah. And so all these three things just they happen. There's no one that's only making, in the third part where you just, I know what the outcome is that I want to have, and therefore I make the right choices and stuff like that. No one is fully on that side. We all make some choices without realizing what the consequences are or without even thinking about it. And we make also sometimes we are afraid of making a choices because we are afraid of the consequences. It all exists and it all intertwines. Now, if you look at mental health of people, you could carefully say that people that struggle a little bit with mental health often also are a little bit more stuck in the first two. They make choices without realizing the consequences. It doesn't have to be that someone is healthy in one part. So let's say I struggle a lot with relationships, but the other things go really well. Then you can see that the way how I make choice in the relationships are a little bit more in the first two. Remember, the first one was choices without realizing the consequences, or choices. Uh, we make safe choices or no choices at all because we are afraid of the consequences, and we shy a little bit away of making choices because we are aiming of certain of for a certain outcome. Does that make any sense? So if people with maybe not so much health issues, mental health issues, but it could be just struggle, and at times that could be a struggle to, like I said, a relationship could be because of financial things. I definitely know how it is when you are a little bit short on finances, then often you are a little bit afraid more to make choices freely if you don't have enough resources to do that, right? So, strangely enough, if you have a healthy finance, I'm not saying that you are coming then overspending it, but actually you have a little bit more freedom to weigh choices as well. Yeah. Okay. So I hope these examples resonates with you. Now, a really good way of looking at how people make choices, a little bit safer to make decisions, right, is how our buying patterns are. Yeah, I study marketing, and we call it commercial economy. So we talk a lot about buying patterns, right? And then we talk about when you buy something. Let's say I buy a certain coffee brand and I go to a store. Very likely, if I like the coffee brand, that I buy, the same coffee brand again. We call that a straight rebuy. But let's say that that same brand brings out a new variation, a little bit bolder flavor or a little bit less bold flavor, and say, yeah, okay, maybe I want to try that, but I still buy it from the same brand because I trust the brand, and we call that a modified rebuy. Basically, it's the same choice, and big commercial companies, they do that because they would like to keep you at least in the brand and give you more choices so that it is less likely that you go away. Yeah, so we talk about brand loyalty, and if you think about brand loyalty not only as the brand as Coca-Cola or Starbucks, and I'll come to Starbucks later, by the way, or some other brands. If you take the word brand a little bit more widely, a little bit in a broader perspective, that you see that we form habits in the things that we buy. And if you take buyer then a little bit, buying then a little bit more loosely, then you can see how that actually affects in many things, right? Buying is typically I buy something and I get a product or a service back, but it doesn't always have to be in exchange for money. It could also be in exchange for other things. So a lot of things are formed in our habits, and you just see it. Go through your grocery list on a weekly basis, and you would see that most of the things actually you're buying is exactly the same. It's easy, it's convenient, but you could arguably say, yeah, but I have the free to buy something else. But subconsciously, remember, we don't even know what we buy, but we don't even know the consequence of it. We just buy it. And so what happens when one of those brands is revealed that is really bad for your health? That's a shock. It shocks you, and you don't want to believe it first because you have to change your habits and all that kind of thing. So actually, in that habit forming, you actually still believe that you have the freedom of choice, but you actually lose a little bit that freedom of choice. Now, that's not so bad if it comes to maybe a brand of coffee, but if it comes to larger things, let's say you get addicted to a couple of things. Coffee can be addicted. Yes, I know, people. I know. I see the comments already coming in. But other things, you actually, the habit forming in itself, could have maybe been a volunteer process, but at the point when habit formings get into your body and your body is craving for it, there is something else than your mind, which is your body, that is driving then what you do. And we all know the word, we are craving something. It could be that you're craving for chocolate, and it could be that you're craving for, I crave sometimes for licorice. I am a Dutch boy and I love my licorice, right? Um, by the way, I made a promise to a friend, and he's going to a treatment. And if he's listening right now, then he knows who I'm talking about. And Irene did too, by the way. We made a promise to eat at least no candies and stuff like that for the coming time that he is going to a certain treatment, because in the treatment he's not allowed to eat sweets and stuff like that. So I want to say that, but I have to be conscious about it. So I made a choice to do that, but I know that now that I'm talking about it, my craving for licorice actually comes up. But very often we are not constraining ourselves with those choices, so we just have give in to our cravings. We also know if we give in to our cravings too much, then that's not a good thing. Now, if sugar addiction is a big thing. A lot of people don't even know that they are sugar addicts. I am one of them, so to speak. I love sugar, and it's not that I eat a lot of candies and stuff like that, but I need a certain amount of sugar, and it takes a conscious effort for me to eat less, to take in less sugar. For instance, in my coffee and other things. Luckily, I don't like candy so much, but in other things I do like some sweet. But I know it's not so healthy for you, so I need to make that conscious decision. So, but here is the thing: a lot of us, and I hope you're not one of them, we cannot stop that craving and then we give in to it. So you could arguably say, but you have the free will. Yeah, you don't actually. You have a freedom of choice, but whether your will is completely free is a whole different thing. Does that make sense? Now let's go back to coffee and branding a little bit, and whether it's a straight ribeye or a modified ribeye, if you remember those terms that I use. Do you know that Starbucks a while ago actually was advertising that they can make 80,000 different varieties of coffee? 80,000. That's like crazy. Well, first they have a venti and a large and a whatever that's called. Those three different sizes. So that in itself, could already give a lot of mixture. You can do it with sugar, no sugar. You can do real sugar. You can do agave. You can do sweeteners. That's all kind of stuff. And then so if you keep going like that and you do a little bit your bad, then you probably come down to 8,000. So, what has that to do with the making the choices? Well, first of all, Starbucks has a policy that they want to give you so many choices that you don't have to go to any other brand, which actually takes away a little bit your choice. Yeah, because you think you have a choice, but you like Starbucks so much so that you actually took away your own choice. Then, secondly, if you have too many choices, there's two things. People get paralyzed by it, analyzes paralyzes, because they have too many choices. But too many choices or too many things that are a little bit similar also causes a lot of anxiety. So freedom of choice, if you don't handle that well, we come to decision making a little bit later, can cause a lot of anxiety. And on a really small scale, let's go to Starbucks and we want to try something new. I want to try, I don't know, a venti caramel latte or something like that. Should I do a caramel latte or should I do a vanilla latte? Let's do a caramel latte. And then my friend comes sitting next to me and say, hey, I took a vanilla latte. It tastes so good. And then you get a little bit of that, I wish I had the other one, right? Because I'm not so happy with my caramel latte. Now, in that case, maybe that, a little bit too far to talk about anxiety. But, let's say you need to buy a new car. Buying a new car, by the way, nowadays not so easy because there are almost no cars available. But let's say that they were available, it can cause a lot of anxiety. Do I buy an SUV? Do I buy a sedan? Do I buy, I don't know, what brand do I buy it on? Do I buy it based on gas mileage? Do I buy on comfort? Do I buy all these kind of things? And the moment you buy, so you took a decision, you had the freedom to choice, then something else starts to happen, which we call cognitive dissonance, right? We start to doubt our choices. And the doubt of our choices often happen because most of our choices are taken too emotional. And I don't want to take the emotions out of any choice, because if you go to a chocolate factory or you go to a bakery, by all means make your choices nice and emotional, right? Because once in a while you have to give yourself a treat anyhow, and that could be very well emotional. But if it comes to a really big thing, can we say that we make that fully rational? There would not be so many car brands and makes if every decision was making rational. Actually, the factories, so the brands, and take brands very loosely, they do everything in their power to make sure that we make our decisions emotional and not rational by pretending that it is all rational. So they give you a lot of facts and things and how safe it is, but every car, there's no car manufacturer saying we are the fifth safest car in the world. If they are that, they probably wouldn't mention it, right? Or we are, the most expensive if it comes to gas in the world. If it comes to the normal human being. If you are a multi-billionaire, you want to buy a race car, then you might not even care about these things. But most people care about these things. And you see that all around us, right? You see, best burger in town, all that kind of thing. No one says I'm the second best burger in town, because that would be maybe honest, but that would be really weird advertisement. So every car manufacturer give you certain data, and they need to be verifiable, but they make sure that they can put it in some way that it comes emotional across you. So or the influence that we have around us is by far more emotional. To make good choices, we actually need to be a little bit more factual, which we most of the time are not. And it depends on the long-term impact of the choice, the more pre-work you need to do, but also the scare comes in that you make the wrong choices. Does that make any sense? So at some point in time you say, oh man, I just need to make a choice, let's pick something and then we'll see it afterwards. If it's a small thing, if you go to a restaurant and you pick a meal and you pick the wrong meal, oh hoorah, that's not a big deal at all, right? In fact, I love to go every time to a new restaurant to taste something new. And what's the worst thing that can happen to me is that the meal didn't taste so well, right? So those are smaller things, right? But I'm sure some people who love to go to the same restaurant and order the same food, and so they say to themselves, I have the freedom of choice, but basically what it is, they choose for safety. Yeah, so freedom of choice has to do with that too, right? I'm afraid to make a different choice because I don't want to be disappointed. So in a way, you could arguably say I have the freedom to choose still, but I took a little bit away the freedom of will in that scenario. Does that make sense? Now, let's move on, because Shah is, as always, talking a little bit too much. So we have to take an account, if we talk about freedom of choice, about the cultural influence, which often starts from our parents and our surroundings. Now, if you grew up in some sort of a religious environment, like when I was young, we grew up in a Catholic environment, and there were a lot of you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. So by that, freedom of choice was taken away. As I grew up, I shook all that away from me, but I can never testify that I'm completely free from my cultural background and that I make choices, in the light of that cultural background of my upbringing, right? If you want to have a completely freedom of choice, then you need to take that in account as well. What is your cultural background? A huge thing nowadays, of course, is the second thing is your social influence, right? Can you testify to me that you never make choices because if I buy a blue shirt, I look better in the peer group that I have, or than when I buy an orange shirt, stuff like that. But if I like orange more, but my peer group is blue, then some people just they still buy blue. They don't buy orange. Does that make sense? So freedom of choice, you have it, but do you always exercise the freedom of choice? That is very unlikely in all areas of your life, right? But the more you can do that, actually, the more you progress and grow in life too. So then we come, do we let other people be free in their choices? You know, that is maybe actually the main questions, right? Is we have a freedom of choice, but with the freedom of choice comes also, you know, um, do we let other people have a freedom of choice? Yeah. First of all, I'm a parent. So do I give my children complete freedom of choice? Now, they are now 19 and 20, so they are more likely to be, you know, making their own choices. And if you think about upbringing, maybe upbringing is all about, you know, trusting that your children make their own choices in a way that is beneficial for them and the surrounding of them. Maybe it's not so important what choices they make, as long that the choices fit in that definition. Is it good for them and the people that they live with, right? So that they don't harm other people. If they make choices like that, maybe it would not be my choice, but it still could be, you know, a really good choice. My daughter is studying Korean. Would not be my choice, but could be a really good choice. I think it's an interesting choice. So that's what we do. But in the beginning, we tell our kids a lot what to do and what not to do. So we actually raise them immediately from the moment they were born. We kind of take away that freedom of will quite quickly. Yeah, if you just think about it. But we do it out of safety. We don't have the time. Sometimes the children don't have the understanding yet to understand why they should not make certain choices. But very soon as possible, I'm not saying that I did this all correct, but that is the discussion you need to have if you are a parent. By the way, I'm a teacher too, so in the teaching it's the same way. Right, my colleague Tom Greten, he wrote a book which is actually just recently published, so I make a little commercial here, Tom, for you, Tom, as well. But in that book, and you know, I say we because we are completely aligned of that, we try to stay away of labeling things as right and wrong. And as a teacher, that's an important thing, because if you start to label things as right or wrong, you actually, you know, subconsciously take away the freedom of choice of your students, right? So, and then on top of that, right and wrong or beautiful and ugly is subjective anyhow. So that's maybe not a good approach to begin with. But it's a big topic in Ton Greten's book. It's called GEM, the Greten Equation Method. Yeah, I know his first name is a little bit hard to pronounce if you're not Dutch. But as a teacher, you know, it's important that you talk with your students, no matter what you teach, by the way, that you talk about these students, um, and that you specifically as a dance teacher, because that's the only teaching that maybe that I know, is that there is no black and white, there is no right and wrong. There are, by the way, subject fields where that is a little bit more strict. I know quite a few electrical engineers where the world is sometimes very black and white for them. Yeah, the machine doesn't work or or it doesn't. Well, it does work or it doesn't. So, and it could be just one little, I don't know, capacitor or something, or how the things called. Anyhow, I'm treading in area that I don't know much about, but I know in some areas the world can be black and white, but most of the time it's not. And so it's a responsibility, there is that word coming back again, for a teacher, yes, to help students to learn, but most of all also to make them learn their own choices. And in dance teaching, that could be very controversial, right? Because you know, you need to be, you know, your feet needs to be 1/8 of a turn there, or your body needs to be 2/8 of a turn there, and that's the only right way to do. And actually, we all know that it is actually not true, but we teach it anyhow, right? So teaching, very big responsibility. If you're an influencer, right? And influencer is, it's not a new word, but it's definitely a newer word now that we have social media. You could be an influencer for, you know, for thousands, if not millions of people on social media. And we often try to influence people, and that's why it's called influencers, to go them from one direction to the other. And it could be to buy a certain product, and it could be to listen to a certain style of music, or that could even be so far to make sure that they make certain choices. Now, wouldn't it be not nicer if you go very first back to what I said about the third level of choice, is that you make your choice with more rational and more information, that if I'm an influencer, I just give objective information of what I stand for without trying to influence people, that they immediately need to make the same choices as I do. Right? The politics doesn't work like that. They want you to sway one way or the other instead of just only informing you what they are standing for in the most objective way. They try to do the same thing as the brands are doing. They might try to make it um, really absolute, and they try to make it more emotional, which takes away the freedom of choice. Now, we don't only see that in politics, we see that in all kind of things. We recently saw it, and I have to mention it, and a lot of people might be hating me for this, but I have to mention that I saw this also in the dance world, right? Where we try to sway people to be either in one way or the other. The world is not that black and white, and so we cannot do that. So we can help people with giving them more information, but we should always acknowledge that the other person has a freedom of choice. And if they make another choice than I do I immediately have to hate them? Right? Because that's a polarizing way of looking at the things. And if there's one thing that I see that is going on in society, that's a polarity, that's a difficult word. Maybe I should try another word, but it's where we try to put people in two opposite camps. Polarization. Um, you see that in politics, definitely in the US politics, but maybe if you look around the world, that's it. And it comes a little bit from a mentality, if you're not with me, then you're against me. And let's not go there, people, because that takes away the freedom of the choice of the other one. If you're a big influencer, they are afraid maybe that they lose, the friendship. They may be afraid that they lose, maybe being in the close circle of you or what have you not, and stuff like that. We've seen that in the dance world recently. I'm not giving you too many details, but if I always have a lot of dancers listening to me, so that you can see that you need to have a freedom of choice. And it doesn't mean that if you go sitting on one side that you immediately fully agree with that side. You might have just different objectives, or maybe you just have a different tactic to sway the other person in a different way, or influence the other person in a different way without immediately forcing that one to a choice. And that comes for us almost to the end, by the way. Just bear with me for a few moments, and that's the word democracy. And the word democracy is often, explained like that. That is a voting system. We all have the freedom to choice. But democracy is, yes, there has to, at the end results, we make a choice and we vote. Maybe that is part of the democracy. But democracy has a lot to do, if you study how the Greek did it, it has a lot to do with dialogue. It is not always about choice. It's definitely not about black and white. It can be and it should be about dialogue, and first and foremost try to truly understand the other person or the other side. Yeah? So it's not only about forming your own opinion, but it's also understanding the other person's opinion. And typically you understand the other person's opinion if you do your homework and if you are open your mind for dialogue. Now, you need to be pretty strong because you could be quickly influenced. If you don't know where you stand yourself and you listen only to the other, very likely that you sway to the other position. Nothing wrong with that. But, listen to all parties. So, let me rephrase that again. Democracy is not always about making choices and votes. It's definitely not black and white, and it should be about more about dialogue and trying truly to understand each other. And by doing that, actually, you acknowledge the other one that they have a freedom of choice and a freedom of their own opinion. Does that make sense? And as a cause of that, you feel more freedom of choice and freedom of your own opinion as well. Now, in our democracy, it's often a lot about the majority, but the world cannot be like that. We have too many minorities in the world, so we should also not only go about this is the choice of the majority, and therefore the rest of the world has to follow us, right? Because that takes freedom away. Trying to understand the minority in our society can change the opinion of the majority as well, which is a good thing. Yeah. So freedom of choice, it's a great thing. There is no freedom of consequences in most cases, right? Because if you're, a criminal, you better make sure that you are willing also to do the time. If you can do the crime, then you need to do the crime time as well. So there is not a freedom of consequences. There's a lot of responsibility, and a topic that I would like to go in a little bit more in the future as well, as where I ended it is, if I have a freedom of choice, do I do also my utmost best to give the other person on the other side also the freedom of choice as well, or am I only trying to influence the other person to make the same choices as I do? Does that make sense? All right. So this was Jean with the place. Before I forget, don't forget to subscribe. I know I was talking in this this fencer, small fencer the whole time. I forgot to change my scenes, but you know how beautiful this is. Don't forget to subscribe either on Facebook here or on YouTube Live. And then if you are with me on Zoom, stay there for a moment. I will be there in a few seconds with all the people to Facebook and YouTube Live and what have you not. I'll see you hopefully next week with another topic. We don't know what it is yet, but if there is something you want me to talk about, then for sure I can do that as well. Yeah? All right, this was Jean at the place, and I wish you a good week. Bye-bye.